All right, guys, so today we are going to focus on the other senses. So we've talked about vision, we've talked about hearing. Let's go through the other three. Our sense of taste or gustation. So taste cells are chemical sensitive receptors that are located in taste bud clusters on our tongue and in our mouth. Taste buds and papillae are located on the tongue, in the throat, and on our soft palate. And for a stimulus to be tasted, right, one of those chemicals to be tasted, a cookie, a piece of pizza, it first needs to be dissolved. There are 5 qualities or 5 receptors that we are sensitive to, 5 different tastes, okay, that we experience. Sweetness, salty, sour, bitter, and umami, which is sometimes categorized as a glutamate with MSG, but think of this one like flavorful, okay, and like a deep palate, something that is very flavorful, like maybe a steak would have a more umami sense. Some other things that influence taste: smell, touch, and temperature influence whether or not we enjoy the taste of something that we are eating. Okay, and you see sort of a zoomed in version of the surface of our tongue and those taste buds here. Okay, so smell, touch, temperature, and taste all sort of work together, right? Our senses work together to make us taste something, okay? For example, sometimes we do a demonstration where I have someone taste an apple and taste a potato, okay? I've cut the skin off, I put them in nice little chunks. They look the same, okay? So visually they look the same. We plug your nose so you can't smell anything, and we cover your eyes as well. And when we eliminate those other senses, it's very hard to distinguish the difference in taste alone between those two things, okay? Because a lot of times the things that we eat is sort of all of our senses working together to help us figure out whether or not we like what we're eating, all right? Like, for example, Brussels sprouts. They don't really have a taste, okay? They have a strong smell that a lot of people don't care for, but they really don't have, you know, that terrible taste that people think that they do, okay? It's sort of all of your other senses working together that makes a lot of people think they don't like them. So types of tasters, based on the work of Linda Bartschuk, who differentiated different types of tasters based on the density of our taste buds on our tongues. So you have people who are non-tasters, that are people who are unable to taste the chemical prop, which is a bitter compound, so they can't taste that specific compound. Medium tasters are people with average numbers of taste buds, and they taste prop at an average or medium level. And super tasters are people who are extremely sensitive to some taste and have a high number of taste buds and are highly sensitive to prop, that bitter compound, okay? Women, fun fact, are more likely to be super tasters than men are, okay? This is sort of one of the theories behind why people are picky eaters, right? We say that picky eaters are really just people who are super tasters that are much more sensitive to certain tastes than other people. So olfaction or our sense of smell. So receptors for smell are located on the olfactory epitheliums, a thin membrane found in our upper nasal cavity. Olfactory cells will carry information to the olfactory bulb, and that will activate our prefrontal cortex, okay? So working together to get that chemical smell to our brain for interpretation, okay? That's in those receptor cells in our nose is where transduction is going to happen for smell, okay? These olfactory receptor neurons have a life cycle of about 30 days and are continually created, okay? So we regenerate some of those cells every 30 days with our smell. Fun fact, if we go back to our sense of taste, taste buds are generated about every 10 to 14 days, okay? So those are regenerated on the surface of our tongue and cheeks every 10 to 14 days. Olfactory cells in the olfactory epithelium are stimulated by gases that are dissolved in the fluid covering that membrane. And for a stimulus to be smelled, it must be dissolved, okay? It must be broken down into smaller particles. Odors or scents can stimulate the olfactory epithelium. Odors can evoke highly emotional memories, okay? And that's because of sort of the proximity to the areas in our brain that are receptive to smells and the areas in our brain that are receptive to forming memories, okay? Because of their proximity and their closeness to one another, certain smells can evoke very strong memories for us, okay? Like if you walked into my room and all of a sudden you smelt that one smell that was always at your grandma's house when she was cooking your favorite meal or whatever it is, right? That would bring back memories very quickly and very strongly for you, okay? That can happen to us. And most of us do have sort of in our collection of memories a specific smell that we recognize hands down every time we walk into a restaurant or someone's house or, at a certain time of year. On average, women detect odors more readily than men. Also, brain response to odors are stronger in women, okay? Pheromones are the same species odors used as a form of chemical communication, and anosmia is the loss or lack of the sense of smell, okay? Specific anosmia is the inability to smell, not small, a single particular chemical. Somastasis refers to the mechanical senses, okay? Kinesthesis are in our vestibular sensation and our skin senses, all right? That refers to all of them together, okay? So our bodily senses. Kinesthesis, more specifically, communicates information about movement and location of our body parts, okay? Kinesthesis. It's about our particular body parts in the world, right? It's what enables you to lift your left arm when I tell you to lift your left arm, right? Receptors for this are found in our joints and our ligaments throughout our body, all right? Dancers have a really good sense of kinesthesis because that is what helps them know that their foot is in the proper position to continue to twirl or do whatever it is or know where they are on the stage. Our vestibular sense is also called our equilibratory sense. It deals with our balance, okay, and our knowledge of our entire body's position, okay, whether we're off balance in the universe, right? Receptors are in our semicircular canals, which we labeled earlier on our ear diagrams, the semicircular canals above the cochlea. In our inner ear, the vestibular organ monitors head movements and movements of the eyes, like we talked about in our crash course video, knowing whether or not we are bobbing our head or not. And please know that semicircular canals are filled with a jelly-like substance that's lined with hair cells, right, that are receptive to that movement and being off balance. Now, our skin senses, we have basic skin senses and that include feeling cold, warmth, pressure, and pain. Those are the 4 sensations that we actually feel. So it's cold, warm, pressure, pain. Those are the only sensations our body experiences, okay, with our skin. Current research does not support the belief that specialized receptor cells exist for each of the 4 sensations, okay? Instead, we just have sort of these general sensation cells that exist and they all interpret these things, okay? So for example, you feel the back of your chair is bumpy, right? Well, bumpy is not a skin sense. Instead, what you're feeling is a variation in pressure, right? You're feeling peaks of pressurous points, and then there are little valleys where you're not feeling as much pressure, and that lets you know that that's sort of where the ridge to that bump ends and another one begins. Touch plasticity. So when an area of the skin is used a lot, it becomes more sensitive, and the receptors actually take over more brain space in the corresponding sensory region of the brain, okay? We've talked about sort of plasticity with your brain and taking over parts that aren't used as much as others. Thus, when blind people use their first 2 fingers for Braille, it has been found that in the brain, the region of the cortex devoted to these 2 fingers actually spreads and takes over the lesser used cortex areas for other touch areas in their hands, okay? Thus, our physical experience does change our brain. Pain is the experience evoked by a harmful stimulus that helps direct our attention towards danger and holds on to our attention. The basics of pain. So pain is not triggered by one stimulus like light is for vision. And at certain intensities, other stimuli can cause pain, right? Like coolness. You can be too cold and that can cause you pain. Our pain circuit are the sensory receptors that respond to potentially damaging stimuli by sending an impulse to the spinal cord, which then sends a message to the brain to interpret it as, hey, I am in pain. Okay, so we have sensory receptors, right, that respond to whatever is causing us pain by sending an impulse to your spinal cord, then to your brain for interpretation, and your brain is what figures out that that is pain. Thicker and faster axons convey sharp pain, and thinner ones convey it as dull pain you are feeling. These axons enter the spinal cord where they release two neurotransmitters depending on the severity of the pain, all right? Mild pain releases glutamate, and severe pain releases both glutamate and substance P. Okay, substance P is another type of neurotransmitter. Pain relief occurs when endorphins block the release of substance P in the spinal cord and brain stem. One theory as to how we experience pain is the gate control theory. And it suggests that the brain can only focus on one pain stimulus at a time. So pain messages from the body will travel along a set of spinal cord nerve fibers, and all other sensory messages will travel along another set. These pain messages are an example of a type of bottom-up processing, right? Taking in our environment and sending it to our brain for interpretation. Fibers carrying pain messages have pain gates, which open during a painful experience. Those gates exist within our spinal cord. The non-pain fibers, however, can sometimes close the pain gates if there's a competing stimulation to larger nerve fibers. This can explain how like rubbing or icing can seem to relieve pain, right? Because our body is taking in, we're in pain, we're in pain, we're in pain. But then you stimulate it in another way, like maybe putting something that's too cold on top of that injury. And so instead of sending the pain messages, that gate is closed for that. And instead it is now allowing us to feel the other one sensation of being too cold and that causing pain. Similarly, if you have ever sort of been injured and then, maybe you had a little brother or an aunt or an uncle or someone who likes to tease you and say, for example, you pulled your tooth out and they punch you in the arm. They say, well, I bet you're not thinking about your tooth hurting anymore, right? Well, that's actually, there's some truth behind that, right? Because of the gate control theory of pain. Because you're not allowed to feel, according to this, pain in two different areas at the same time because you have this gate that's only allowing one to be processed. So when they punched you, all of a sudden you were thinking about being punched in the arm and how that hurt. And so you weren't really processing the pain associated with your tooth, which is what you were initially feeling pain for. So top-down processing also occurs during our pain experience because our brain will play an important role in whether or not you perceive pain and how that perception occurs, how intense it will be, okay? For example, athletes are often so focused on competitions that they often are unaware of any injuries until after they have finished competing, right? They're sort of distracted. Their perception is playing a role in it. Similarly, little kids, when they get injured, sometimes there are some kids who can hop right up and are fine when they scrape their knee. For some kids, it's sort of the end of the world, right? There are some external and environmental factors that play a role, particularly in the perception of pain and how we respond to it. And lastly, phantom limb pain is when the person feels pain in an area of an amputated limb, so a limb that's no longer there, okay? This suggests that the brain is misinterpreting some spontaneous nervous system activity that still occurs even when the normal sensation or that normal sense organ is not there, okay? So this phenomenon does exist, and we tend to think that this has more to do with that brain plasticity. And again, when if you've lost a limb, then a particular area of your brain for that limb is no longer active, right? So brain plasticity is going to occur where neighboring regions are going to take over sort of the usefulness of that region. And so we think that now stimulating that new region is causing you to feel or experience or think that you are feeling pain in that limb that's no longer there because of that brain plasticity.